Okay. We were talking about the new City of Portland rules, um, and these were just passed on March 1st. And there are two pieces to it. One is tenant screening, and the other is security deposits. And the security deposits are going to affect us the most. Um, and Taylor and I and Kimberly were talking about how we're going to change our processes to meet the new requirements. So the new security deposit requirements require that you charge no more than 1 times the rent, unless a tenant does not meet the initial screening criteria, and then you can charge up to 1.5 times the rent. Or if you are charging for last month's rent, you can charge for last month's rent, but then you can only charge 50% of 1 month's rent. So like if rent's $1,000 per month, it's either $1,000 security deposit, or if it's a conditional approval, they don't meet the initial screening criteria, then it's $1,500 is the max. Otherwise, you can charge last month's rent for $1,000 and then a security deposit of $500.
So 1.5 times is going to be the max.
Pretty much. And you have to allow the tenant to do a payment plan if you choose, if they have to pay the additional 50% due to conditional screening approval.
When does that take effect?
It took effect this weekend, so it's in effect. The other piece of the security deposit legislation is that we have to finalize a condition move-in report that lists all personal property and fixtures and ages of those items in a move-in condition report within 2 weeks of move-in. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then we are in violation, and it's a 2 times the rent penalty, or 2 times the security deposit penalty.
Pay to whom?
To tenants.
Yeah, and if they have to sue us for it, then we have to pay attorney's fees.
This is only in Portland, though.
This is only in the city of Portland.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
done with Portland.
So, and then if there is something gets replaced during the tenancy, the move-in condition report has to be updated. So, like if we put in a new refrigerator, we have to update that move-in condition report. Otherwise, and they damage it. Otherwise, we can't charge them for it. The move-in condition report is like the Bible when it comes to charging a tenant security deposit.
So would you be updating the original one, or do you have to do
you would do an amendment?
Okay.
You would just amend it.
Okay.
And then part of the move-in condition report is you have to provide digital photos to the tenant. So
send it online. Can you just send an email attachment?
You could probably just give them a Dropbox link.
Yeah.
Then you also have to give the tenants 24 hours notice of when you're doing a move-out inspection. And then we have to make sure that we're providing the City of Portland depreciation schedule for fixtures and personal property. City of Portland's put out a useful life of whatever it is, but we're pretty cognizant of those useful lives when we're charging security deposits anyway. So we've kind of already fit into that, but now there's a rigid rule that we have to apply. And yeah, so that is the moving condition report. And then moving on to what is specifically not allowed to be charged in a charged to a tenant security deposit. So the main one that we have been charging for is cleaning to get the unit back to rent ready condition. That is specifically not allowed to be charged anymore unless there is an excess of ordinary wear and tear. So
That's pretty gray.
yeah, interior painting is not allowed to be charged either, unless it's specific damage caused by the tenant. So we're pretty good about this. We're not charging tenants to do full paints, and yeah.
So for excess of ordinary wear and tear, that's pretty much just like staining and animal urine, or like ripping of the carpet.
So when it comes to carpet, I want to say that the city of Portland is deemed that it has a 5 to 7 year useful life. So if it's beyond that useful life, it's worth nothing. And so you can't charge for it. But anyway, anything, you're only allowed to charge for damage to fixtures, appliances, equipment, or personal property itemized in the rental agreement. If the damage is due to a tenant act or omission, and you're allowed to charge for actual costs reasonably incurred to repair the unit to its condition at the beginning of the lease.
So what about like Curtis, if that garbage disposer that just was replaced, we charge tenant damage? Is that okay? But that's after this weekend. Are you saying we cannot because we don't have a move-in report on that?
There is some gray area on what to do with leases prior to this. I want to say that this only affects new leases and lease renewals that have occurred after this. So for any lease renewal, we have to create a condition report. And Kimberly and I are going to be creating the template for the condition report. So that is this is basically the it really focuses on the move-in condition and the move-out condition, which we're pretty good about that right now. We just have to make some tweaks to it so that we comply with the rules. And it really does, like, this is something that's going to increase tenant satisfaction, and it's going to bring clarity to something that's a big gray area. So I see this as an opportunity to become a better company and to be great and add value to our owners and our tenants and increase tenant satisfaction and, you know, like get more 5-star reviews because we're so clear and we dot our I's and cross our T's when it comes to putting in the work to create these condition reports. That said, this is going to be more work. So, yeah.
The itemized list in the rental agreement, Chris, is that separate from the move-in condition report that we'll be sending them?
Should be all contained in one.
It's all going to be contained in one, except what we have to do is we have to finalize the report within 2 weeks of their move-in. So if they haven't filled out the move-in condition report or their move-in inspection, then we have to publish ours to the tenant portal with digital photos so that they have access to it and they can see it.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be sent on the lease that I'm sending out, like after they get approved, right? Like the itemized list.
There's one piece in here that no, the itemized list does not have to be on the lease. It needs to be on the move-in condition report.
Okay.
The security deposit, though, can no longer be owner held. And that's because we have to list on the lease which bank the security deposit is held at. And so, and that has to go on the lease. So we need to update our lease to show that the security deposit is being held at Bank of the West at the Lake Oswego branch or whatever. But it says that we need to do a, in the rental agreement, provide name and address of the banking institution where security deposit for prepayment of last month's rent or security deposit will be held.
So if you're a self-managing landlord now, how do you do that?
You have to have a separate account for the security deposit. It's a new requirement in the city of Portland. Yeah. Okay, so, but what's nice is that you're not in the city of Portland.
Yeah.
Haven, isn't it?
Yeah.
Haven is, yes. So that is the rules regarding the security deposit. This is going to require the most change.
Hold on one sec. As a property management company, aren't we allowed to hold funds in escrow? So we could be the banking institution, and we could just be the first part of it.
So this just states we have to tell them which bank it's being held at.
But we could just say it's listed with us.
No.
Because Uptown's not a bank, right?
We are an institution that holds money. We have escrow accounts, and Appfolio is one that lists those out. I don't think we need to say exactly what bank it's in, but we're holding it.
The rule states that we're supposed to list the banking institution. It's a pretty clear rule. Yeah. Okay, back onto application and screening. This one, is a little more detailed. 13 pages, yes. Okay, so a couple changes we need to make. First is that we need to have a notice of availability period. So when we list a property for rent, when it goes live, we have to wait 72 hours before receiving applications. So essentially,
So people have fair chance. So if we know it's going to be available, we can list it. We can list the date in the future.
Notice of
So the
availability.
notice can start once we know it's going to be available. So best practices is after you do a scope of work inspection, we get that marketing up and we say it's going to be available on this date. Please keep this as the 72-hour notice that it's going to be available.
Yeah.
No sooner than 72 hours.
So if something is accepted, if an application is accepted prior to the 72 hours, then that application is early, and that application has like an 8-hour penalty. So if somebody applies the moment that a property is listed, and then somebody waits the 72 hours till like exactly when the application period is live, that person's application is considered for like received on minute 1, and then the person who applied early is
8 hours behind them.
8 hours behind them. so that potentially there could be a wave of applications that come in.
So the other best practice to do with this, the best practice is to list before the rental's available and list high. So you try to get the highest price, and then when it is available, then you drop the price.
Honestly, I don't think that this affects us. Like, yes, we have to comply with the notice of availability, but I don't think, AJ, I don't think it affects our pricing. Right? I mean, when it comes to like us listing something, you know, generally it's taking a few days for applications to come in. Like, people need to go see it. They need, like it. I don't see this as a problem. We're not having multiple, like, really difficult multiple application situations.
By and large,
And if we do, we probably need to take that property down and list it for more.
Are
So
we allowed to do that under this rule then?
yeah, you still can rent it out for whatever you want. Okay. So this all needs to be attached to our application.
This is also now been initiated as of March 1, right?
Yes. So Kimberly and I will work on getting a link to all of this stuff in our application. And yeah, we don't really have any vacancy wait lists, so that's something that doesn't apply to us. But essentially it says names must be added in the order received. Open application period essentially states, you know, it's first come, first serve. We're already doing first come, first serve. And Appfolio records the time and the date that each application is received. So Appfolio already complies with this. There's a new limit on screening fees. So we're in the all screening done by landlord. So this is just putting in the limit on screening fees, but we are fine in that. So moving on to screening criteria. So the screening criteria is, there are now two options with the screening criteria. There is something called the low barrier, which we are not going to use, and the landlord choice. So right now we're in the landlord choice. And essentially what it says is we're allowed to create our own screening criteria, which we have. And, but what we have to do is that after a tenant doesn't meet our screening criteria, we have to send them a written assessment, which we do already with our adverse action letters, stating why they didn't meet the, you know, why they didn't meet the screening criteria.
Do those need to be mailed as well, U.S. mail?
No, they don't need to be mailed. So the one thing that we don't do that we need, that we will have to do, is that if someone asks to appeal and for us to consider the supplemental evidence, this is something that we can do at our weekly meeting. And you know, if we do deem a tenant to, you know, that maybe that they can qualify based on supplemental evidence, we don't have to necessarily give them that unit, but we have to work with them and try and place them in a unit that is similar. So,
We already do
yeah. So denials in general, they need to comply with the rules. Denials with landlord choice criteria. We must conduct an individual assessment and be willing to consider supplemental evidence. This is something that we already do. And yeah, it's something that we already do. One thing that we don't do currently is the appeal section. And you know, if a tenant appeals, you know, then we can just say we're going to talk about it. We'll review your appeal within 7 days at our weekly meeting, and we'll just make sure that that gets added to the weekly meeting. You know, if they don't initially meet the screening criteria, it's something that we can talk about in our issues list. So yeah, that is the main piece of the screening criteria, is that we now have to deal with the landlord choice in the individual assessment, which we already do, but potentially we could have appeals that we're dealing with. In regards to marketing, we do have that 72-hour waiting notice period. And then for our applications, we need to make some changes to our application. So,
And we're letting our owners know about these changes as well?
Kimberly and I are, as we update our processes, we will, I'll put out a video and an outline of the new rules. So, yeah. Any questions?
There is, if you scroll down just to set priorities for people up a little bit on the green section right there. Priority for people with mobility disabilities. I don't have any problem with this whatsoever, but obviously we're trying to eliminate vacancy. You might not know, I don't know, but if there's someone who wants to move in prior to someone,
Yes, that's always.
They have priority, right?
Yeah, they need, you know, this property can be offered to you, but you have to move in on this date and pay the rent based on this date. Like that's, okay. It's not, you know, if somebody wants to move in 6 months, we don't have to hold the unit for them.
Okay.
And it only applies to accessible type A units.
Which we only have a couple of. So it's something that we'll need.
Is there one in the 72nd?
There has to be one in the 72nd.
Those are the only two we got.
No, there's one in the Franklin and Tucker too. So we'll definitely need to sit down with Eric and discuss this. Well, it doesn't apply to Javier.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't apply to Tanner either.
True.
Why is that?
Because they're not in Portland.
Yeah.
Sweet. Good work, Chris.
Cool.
You guys have any questions?
Why does Portland have a more specific law when it comes to these things? I noticed that in particular, it's mostly Portland that does that, or that has that.
They are a progressive and liberal town, and also currently right now, I think 60 to 70% of Portland are renters. So the political action is to try and get them more protection so that they keep voting for them.
I see.
Just a side comment, when it becomes more complicated, more people need professional management services where we deal with this day in and day out. And we're going to be 100% better than someone that tries to do it just by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So this, although it may be cumbersome for us in the beginning to get it figured out, ultimately, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And if we find that it does cost us extra money to do it, that's going to get passed on to the landlord or the tenant, ultimately. So unfortunately, what they're trying to do just increases rent for the tenants. So it's kind of unfortunate, but that is what happens.
Thank
All right, I'm
you.
gonna stop recording.